Hi class, Mr. Butler here to talk to you about paragraph 6 and 7 of The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. I will state up front that the reading for this particular excerpt of the passage is especially difficult and will definitely require the definitions in the annotation using the comments feature of Google Docs as we've been practicing. This is going to be crucial for understanding what Poe is describing in the story. One concept that I want to introduce to you right away is that of a masquerade, which is a kind of party or ball where the guests wear elaborate masks. There's an image on the handout that depicts this. And the idea of masks is really important in this story. The title is The Masque of the Red Death. This is a contagious disease that Poe makes up. It's fictionalized, but its symptoms are, horrific, where you bleed from your pores and your skin and your face and you look like you have a red mask on. This is the effect of the lighting in that 7th apartment, which is especially scary compared to the other apartments in the description of the previous paragraphs that we looked at. But for these paragraphs, we're going to zoom out and look at a party that's going on in the entire monastery or abbey. Remember that there is a pandemic happening, and people outside of the walls of this monastery who do not have the same wealth and power and privilege as the prince are suffering and even dying. And there is language in some of the previous paragraphs where the prince talks about how the external world can take care of themselves, showing how the prince might not care so much about people outside of his interior world. And the masquerade also reminds us of not only the Masque of the Red Death, but right now, in terms of the connection to our experience in living through a pandemic, the masks that people are wearing to prevent the spread of the plague. Edgar Allan Poe probably would have understood this connection himself, wearing masks to prevent airborne infectious diseases is not new to this pandemic. And so the idea of a mask is symbolically important. And Poe deliberately uses a masquerade to remind us of the irony that the wealthy and the privileged experience crises differently than we do. So there's 2 paragraphs here. Paragraph 6 is short. It's important to know that the Duke is not the prince. So the Duke is the original owner and the original decorator of the monastery or the abbey that they're hiding in. He's not a character in the story, but he's described through the implication of the decoration. The text says, "But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel." So you want to look that word up. Revel means they're partying, they're having a good time. The courtiers and the prince's group of people. And the tastes of the Duke, he's the one who designed this place. So we're describing this character who's not in the story through his taste of decor. He had a fine eye for color and effects. We know that from the apartments that were described in the previous paragraphs. He disregarded the decora, or the decoration, of mere fashion. So he doesn't care about just how it looks. Also, he really needs to have a powerful effect or impact of the space he creates. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions or his ideas glowed with barbaric luster. So a sort of a uncivilized glow or allure. There are some who would have thought him mad or crazy based on his taste and his concepts of design. His followers felt he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure he was not. That line resonates with me. The idea of knowing someone in person is really relevant to us now that we're in a pandemic, and would have been in the context of this story too. All right, the next paragraph is much longer and it's very complicated, but I'm going to do my best to simplify it for you now. Make sure that you have the text open in another window and we can take a look at this together. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers. The 7 chambers are the different apartments. They each had their own fireplace, which was sort of a standing bowl which a fire would be lit to illuminate the apartment. Those embellishments are movable. So he's saying that the Duke had the ability of moving all these light sources into sort of a centralized room to allow for a party to go on. And it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the masquerades, or these balls, or these parties with the masks. Be sure they were grotesque. Grotesque in this case meaning strange and bizarre, and almost in a gothic sense, which is the style that Edgar Allan Poe adopts for his short stories. There was much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm. So it's strange, almost ghostly, the experience of this party that's happening with the prince. Much of what has been seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies, such as madmen fashions. There were much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre. Make sure that you look up those words to find them and put them in the comments. But essentially, it is a strange and beautiful and otherworldly experience. Something of the terrible and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. So this is not a normal party. It's a little perverse. It's a little disgusting. And the idea of having a party in a pandemic, or celebrating in this sense, might be disgusting or perverse in that sense as well. Here's where it really gets weird. To and fro in the 7 chambers stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams. Now, what Poe means by dreams here are up for interpretation. Maybe he means the dreams or the thoughts, the desires and anxieties of the guests. It could mean the dreams, the memories sort of the ghosts of the occupants of previous guests. To me, I see it, and this is really giving it away here, but that's sort of the reward for watching the video. I see it as a symbol of the Red Death. The dreams, the worry, the fear, dream as in nightmare, of this presence that is there with us that we can't see, but we know is very dangerous and very horrifying. And that is essentially what a contagious disease is. It's something invisible that's ever present, which we think about but can't see, which we try to avoid, but we don't know where it is. And I think that's what Poe's getting at here with these dreams, or these sort of ghosts, these spirits that are haunting or stalking the party. But what's interesting is the effect that the party has on them. And these dreams writhed in and about, taking hue, or the color, from the rooms and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And now there strikes the ebony clock, that was the last assignment, paragraph 5, which stands in the hall of the velvet. And then for a moment all is still and all is silent save the voice of the clock. Their dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant. And a light half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. And now the music swells, and the dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever. So it's almost like the dreams are energized by the spirit of the party. Remember, the clock chimes, and it has such a strange, peculiar musicality that it stops everybody and makes them sort of laugh nervously about it. The dreams, I think, also express the energy and the vitality and the happiness of the party, and that when the party stops, the reality of the danger outside the walls of the castle may seep in again. And that is an interesting connection that Poe makes. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are now none of the masks who venture. So it's also interesting that none of the guests of the party go into this the last scariest of the apartments, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls. And to him whose foot falls on the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal, more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. So this last place is really scary, and the other masked partygoers are too frightened to even go there. So Poe is mixing emotions. He's mixing sort of the feeling of letting go and losing control that you might have at a party, but also the fear of living through a pandemic. And those two things together are a really interesting combination that I think fits pretty well with Gothic themes and Gothic aesthetic that Poe uses. Okay, so we've got some questions here. Definitely just want to talk about these quickly. One, the Duke is the original owner of the Abbey Prince Prospero is hiding in. What might people think about the Duke? They talked about how he was a madman, how his decoration showed a barbaric luster. These are the kinds of phrases you want to use as evidence for this one. How does Poe describe the masquerade? Make sure to define what a masquerade is and talk about the strangeness and the bizarreness and the otherworldliness, some of the words that he uses to describe that, some of the vocabulary words you would have annotated. Number 3, really hard, challenging question. How does the party affect the dreams that are lurking throughout the rooms? This really depends on your interpretation, whether you see them as ghosts or fears or anxieties or even as like the disease itself. That might affect the way that you frame your answer to this question. Number 4, based on the figurative description of the dreams, what might they represent? And that's an extension of 3. So that's it, guys. Remember, I've got office hours on Tuesdays at 2. If you have any questions for me, you can always email me as well. And good luck, and be safe, and stay healthy.